Blocked up there. Look.
Good evening, friends and family, and thank you for coming to another night with Behind Black Business, supported by Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities. And tonight, we have a little different format. We're going to have a roundtable discussion about Black literacy. And so we have tonight Brother Troy 5X from the Nation of Islam. I want to thank you so much for coming tonight, Brother Troy.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Doris Lewis, who is one of our board members. And what makes Doris significant here in this discussion is her time and her experience coming from Mississippi and coming through the civil rights movement. And this is all very relevant to our topic tonight. I first want to say, as you know, we are a nonprofit organization. We're in our second year of existence, and we've been working to help businesses in our community. And we've had a lot of success in terms of helping people get websites up, connecting businesses together, and helping them to form alliances. And through this podcast, we are enhancing the support and awareness of our Black businesses. We generally are having a Black business on the podcast that we interview, and we have done over 70 podcasts so far. And we still have a list of other businesses in line that we will be bringing to you. RGBC, we go to fight for our businesses because we know we have gentrification going on in this city and throughout this country where Black people have built communities, a community of people who have the same interests and goals. And these our communities have been broken apart by gentrification. And so we've had some small businesses that have been in trouble, and our RGBC has stood by them to support them. And we also have a public policy division where we're trying to help our bookstores right now. With this public policy petition that we have out now, we are asking or demanding that our public schools and our libraries give contracts to our Black bookstores. And that's nothing unusual. There are other municipalities that do this. And so that helps to circulate the dollars in our communities. We know if we are supporting each other, then those dollars will circulate. We know if businesses are supporting each other, those dollars will circulate. We know when our children see us working and us owning businesses, that encourages them. It inspires other entrepreneurs, and it all helps the dollar to circulate, and it helps us to work together and build a community that we feel proud of, that we can live in and we can share in. I was on a Zoom meeting, and they were asking over in the South Shore area where the Obama Library is coming. They were asking people, what kind of things do you want? And people want restaurants, they want grocery stores, they want places to entertain and where they can meet and gather. And so this is what a community is about. And so we feel that by supporting our businesses, that we can help to bring our people together. And now, when we talk about our bookstores, we also do a book giveaway. Once a month, we place a bookstore on our website, one of our Black bookstores. And our bookstore of this month is Rose Cafe, which is an online bookstore. This is a young lady named Aisha Malone. She lives in the Roseland area, and she has an online bookstore. And we are supporting her. And she has selected a book of the month. And the name of that book is The Sum of Us: What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together by Heather McGee. So that is the book that she selected for the book of the month. And when we have this um, giveaway, it is for our subscribers. So if you subscribe to our website, then you become eligible to win this book. And every month we give a book away. So please subscribe to our website. And I want to let you know that also, as we talk about books, Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities is sponsoring an event this weekend, September the 17th, at 1717 East 87th Street in the parking lot, right next door to Harold's Chicken. And this is to enhance the awareness and support of the Underground Bookstore. Underground Bookstore has been in that community for over 20 years. And so we are going to have other bookstores present, authors, we'll be able to talk about bookstores, we'll have speakers, and we are also going to be having entertainment. And we know that our musicians help us to carry our message. And through this, we have invited Maggie Brown and David Boykins. Maggie Brown is a songstress. She sings jazz music. She sings it all. And David Boykins has a wonderful young band that he's bringing forward with the fusion of jazz music, hip hop, and soul. And there will be some refreshments there. We have a young man, they call him Petey, but he is one of the distributors of 1186 Water. And they distribute water. They have water on their land in Alabama, and this is a Black owned business. And so he will be there distributing his water as well. So we're asking everyone to come out. This is about Black literacy. And this is what our discussion is going to be about tonight, as we uphold this movement towards reading, because we feel that this is where it all starts in terms of what's in your mind and what you're thinking. And it's through reading that we are informed, and we are informed about ourselves and about our history. And so this is why we're having this event. And I don't really want to call it an event, I want to call it a movement, because it is something that we need to continue to do. So tonight, this is what we are going to be talking about: Black literacy and why it is important to us. As we know, we once could not read. It was illegal to have a book and to be able to read. And that was during slavery. And many of the slaveholders could not read. They were illiterate. And they knew that if we learned how to read, that we would be able to propel ourselves forward and move out of that institution. And that's exactly what happened. So I would like to start this discussion, and to give Brother Troy and Doris, an opportunity to express, why they feel, reading is important to our community.
Who do you want to start first?
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead,
Uh,
Doris.
well, it is as vital, as important today for us to know how to read, for us to promote reading. And I'm glad, Denise, that we've set aside this show tonight specifically for that. Because there was a study that came out in 2019 by the National Center for Education Statistics. And they said in between 2012 and 2014, only 23% of Black people, 23% of Black people are still illiterate. That is really frightening that in 2022, that this is where we are. And I think what we've done in the past, I think we kind of left it by the wayside, and when integration came about and all of these other things that took place, we were thinking that it would continue. But when you really look at the fact that today, between 23 and 25% of Black people not being able to read, we have to question ourselves, just how far have we come? What kind of progress have we really made? And as you said, there was a time that we were forbidden to read. Between 1740 and 1834, there were 6 states that passed laws that prohibited anyone teaching Black people to read. If you were caught teaching Black people to read back then, your hand would be cut off. I mean, Black people were brutalized if they were caught teaching other Black people to read. And with the whites who taught Black people to read, you went to jail. But they did some very cruel things to us, like cutting off your finger, cutting off a hand. So that just shows you, even today, that it must have been really, really
Mm-hmm.
important. There was something about that era, that during that era, that they did not want us to read. That was very important. And
Mm-hmm.
one reason is that they thought that if Blacks learned how to read, they could learn to sign those documents. That they could write a document and they could sign the slave master's name, saying that they were free, and if they went to a free state, then they would accept it. Another reason why they didn't want Black people to read is because of insurrections that took place. So if you had something out pertaining to an insurrection and you could not read, well, you wouldn't know what they were talking about. But those Black people who did, there were many who learned how to read during slavery time. With all of those obstacles, with all of those draconian laws that prevented us from learning how to read. So that just shows, even today, it is very, very important. It's very, very significant that our young people, and Black people in general, know how to read. But when you look at some of the statistics today coming out of Chicago, coming out of other cities around the country where there's a large Black population, 50%, if not more, in some of these areas, in some of these schools, our young people are coming out not being able to read. So it's a lot more insidious now. Whereas back then, as I said, if you were caught teaching Black people to read, you knew what was going to happen to you. But now it's more insidious. I'm from the Chicago public school system. I retired. I worked there 30 some years. And I saw, even before I left, what they were doing that was not encouraging in terms of getting our young people to read. They would come up with all these different programs year after year, and they never really focused on just the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which they used to do back in the day. And so it is still extremely significant that we teach our people how to read. And we need to be challenging these schools, these principals in these schools. when these statistics come out and black children are always behind and everything. So as a community, we're going to have to get just as involved as we used to be, because education was very important to us uh,
Mhm.
back 50 or 60 years ago or more. It was so important because our ancestors knew the relevancy of knowing how to read. So it's incumbent on us now to go into these schools and look at these reading scores. And if they're low, we need to question, why are they low? And if we don't continue to do that, it's not going to change. So it's very important for us to make sure that our children are being taught how to read.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Doris. Brother Troy?
Thank you. First, just reflecting on what Sister Doris said, those statistics have not changed in a very long time. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan did a presentation, I believe it was in 2008, entitled "The New Educational," and actually, no, it was the Educational Challenge. And he shared many of those statistics in particular as it relates to young black men, but as well as looking at the statistics as it relates to the country. So even though of course, as usual, wherever you can find a deficiency in this society, you find us black people being at the bottom of that. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, in the book A Torchlight for America, states that he who prescribes the diameter of your knowledge dictates the circumference of your activity. And the analogy that he gives is a picture. If you look at what goes in, is the determination on what you're able to produce and what comes out. So if not only was the plan in terms of the fear of us being able to read so that we could gain information. But even when they did allow us to begin to read, they wanted to make sure that they limited what we were able to read, as Sister Doris mentioned. So you
Mhm.
look at even with the Bible, and they talk about, I can't think of the name of it, but they looked at the research how that they created a Bible for the slave. And they made
Mhm.
sure that anything that was could inspire or that they thought would instill or inspire revolt and revolution, that they attempted to extract those things out of the Bible, because they didn't want some information for us to get into our minds that would empower us and that'll open us up so that we will begin to see that there was another alternative. So I think that when we look at literacy is not just about the ability to read,
But to understand.
because of course right now if you look at the producers and what they're putting in the textbooks, even now in Texas is probably the forefront that determines what will be in the textbooks, is that they're taking out things and they're putting things in. So even now when they talk about slavery, they don't talk about slavery, they talk about the different people who have come to this country as immigrants.
Mhm.
And they've removed out the Ku Klux Klan and just all of these things. So it's not just about, of course, literacy is important, but even in that, it's even more important that we make sure that as we begin to push literacy, that it's important that we determine what information our people are reading, because that will determine the direction that we're going in.
That is absolutely, you are absolutely correct. And it's the information that we are so limited with that is causing our people, I mean, you can only operate on what you have and what you know. And so we're operating on so much misinformation, limited information, even with civics, people who come here to this country as immigrants. We have this program here in Chicago, down at the city, called the New America, New City America, and civics is a part of their training and education, so they know how to navigate themselves through this system,
You,
and that is not taught uh,
right.
properly, if it's taught at all, to our children in our schools. And when you ask questions about it, even sometimes who the mayor is or who the governor is, or they just don't know,
Well, you
because it's not a part of their conversation. And I
know,
was listening to Doris also talking about the school system and what happened in the school system. I also worked in the Chicago public schools for 35 years, and I went through the Chicago Public Schools as a student, and they had a pretty good curriculum when I was coming through, but it changed
Mhm.
when I went to college and I came back and I decided I wanted to come back and work in my community. The curriculum was changing, and they were bringing people in with programs for teaching reading, for teaching math, and there were teachers who had been there for many years, and they said, I wish these people would get out of my classroom and teach and let me teach my children. And there's repetition and review and testing and repetition and review and testing that you need, that they took out of the curriculum. And I think this is one of the reasons why some of the Asian countries, like in Japan and in Singapore, which has one of the highest literacy rates, that's part of their formula, you know, is a repetition of information and testing. And they spend many more hours
Mhm.
reading than we do.
And Denise, another interesting thing about that same report that I just stated, 30, 35%, only 35% of whites could not read.
Mhm,
34% of Hispanics. Now, Hispanics have only been in this country 35 years,
mhm,
and their reading rate is higher than ours. So that makes me question, okay, what is going on here?
mhm,
When I was in the system, and that was less when COVID came about. I Because I was going in subbing at that time.
Mhm.
So when COVID came about, I stopped. But the cruelest thing that I saw Chicago public school system do to children, particularly our children, if a child was in the fifth grade, and a child was reading at a second grade level, you still had to teach that child a fifth grade curriculum. And I would always say, this is automatic failure.
Mhm.
How can you expect a child in the fifth grade, but they're reading on the first or second grade level, but yet you're telling your teachers you have to teach them this fifth grade curriculum? That was automatic suicide to me when it came to reading or teaching, period. And so as a result, I was always rebellious. I taught outside of the box when it came to our children because I knew that that was a setup. That was an automatic setup. If the kid can't read on the first grade level or the second grade level, how can you teach him reading on the fifth grade level? But that is what was required of teachers. And you said there was a teacher who said, I wish these people would get out of my classroom. I heard that so many times. Every time you got a new superintendent, there was a new program.
that's right.
Nothing consistent. Nothing consistent. And as Brother Troy mentioned about Texas, I think Texas is the worst state. They're practicing revisionary history.
Mhm.
They will tell you, they want to tell you now that black folks like the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan were friends of black people. That kind of nonsense. But it's actually happening. It is going on and it is hurting us. And again, as we talk about all the time, that's why it's so important that we have these black bookstores. These
Mhm,
black bookstores who are going to have books in there about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, about Marcus Garvey, and all Dr. John Henry Clark and all of these other historians, because they're not going to get it in the public school system. They have never gotten it. It's been by design to dumb us down, to not allow us to find out about what we've done in this country. In fact, when you talk about Black history, when you read about Black history, you're reading about world history. There is no history without Black history. World history is Black history. So again, what we're doing tonight is so important. And as you said, we need to make it has to be a revolution. It has to be a revolution. I think about Fidel Castro when he took over
Mhm.
in Cuba. It took over in Cuba. What he did, he started a revolution around reading in Cuba. They were totally illiterate before the Cuban Revolution. Today, 95, if not more, percent of the Cubans read. And so that's why they're the tops when it comes to medicine, when it comes to science, when it comes to engineering. They are up there with the so-called the best, the Norwegian countries. Even they're better than America when it comes to literacy. So we have to start this revolution. It cannot stop because we're falling behind. We're losing so much. So this is a good way for us to start this revolution all over again.
And the message is, it keeps coming back to us. I mean, you listen to Frederick Douglass, and he talked about how important reading was, that if you learn how to read, coming from where he came, coming from slavery, he said you will always be free.
Hmm.
Marcus Garvey, his book on message to the people, in the first chapter, he talks about his first chapter is about reading.
Hmm.
And he talks about reading everything, reading history, reading about science, reading about politics, reading about geography, reading. He just talks about reading, getting anything you can get your hands on to read, and how important that is, and how it helps to build your critical thinking skills as well as your informational base that you'll have, because we're so used to, I hear people talking about things so much, and they're just talking off the cuff of their sleeve. They talk about what makes sense, but when you have some background knowledge that you can bring to the table, you can think more critically in terms of what you're reading.
One thing, that going back to the point that you made, and it's so important when you look at what happens in the third and fourth grade or up to that point. And what they say, I believe, and I assume that this is still the case, that most newspapers are written at the level of third to fourth
Right.
grade.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I know many of us heard in the past that they would determine how many prisons they would build
Based on
based
this.
on third and fourth grade test scores.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when you look at the significance of that period, it's up to third, maybe fourth grade. That's the foundation of your educational
Right.
experience.
Hmm.
If you don't learn how to read and you don't learn the mathematics that you learn up to that level, then you don't have a base in which to build on. So from pre-K to third grade, maybe fourth, you're learning to read. But after that point, you're reading to learn.
Right.
So if you don't have that basic skill, then you're going to be left behind. So that doesn't give you a lot of doors and opportunities, and that's where the prison industrial complex comes from.
Yeah.
So when you look at how Sister Doris mentioned that they don't encourage you to even fill in those gaps at that point. And
Mm-mm.
if those gaps aren't filled at that point, nobody's teaching you your timetables or your multiplication tables in fifth
Mhm.
grade.
Mhm.
Nobody's teaching you how to read. So if you didn't get it at that point in time, then you can basically say your educational career is over, unless there's someone that intervenes at that particular point in time. And so
And
when
see,
many say that the educational system isn't successful, it's quite successful. It's
Yeah.
doing exactly what
Mhm.
it was
What they
designed
wanted
to
to
do.
do. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's a book by William Watkins, The White Architects of Black Education. And he talks about all the psychology and sociology and how all of these things were put in place to design a particular type of educational system that would get the results that they desired and intended to um, for us to get. And therefore, there again, you will see the results that they know, because they know and can determine what went in, so they can basically determine what is going to come out of us.
absolutely. And I have seen them take grammar, out of the curriculum, so to
Right,
speak,
right.
where teachers will actually tell you, I can't teach grammar. I would go into a classroom and, I'm not a grammar teacher, I'm a speech pathologist. And I'm telling the teacher about what, some deficits I see. And I have the teacher telling me, well, I can't teach that separately. If I do that, then there are people from the state will come in here and write me up, and grammar and English, was
And
one of the most challenging and important and serious classes that we had, when I was in grammar school and in high school, because it teaches you the structure
Hmm.
of language and how to put your ideas together. And so you're doing some mumbo jumbo with this. And so the children, even if they can read, if they do manage to be able to actually read words and sound out words, now how do I learn how to express myself?
and Denise,
Or how do I even learn how to how do I understand what I'm reading if I don't understand the structure of the language?
and to show you how insidious it is, how can you teach and not teach grammar?
Mhm.
These children don't know the different parts of speech today. In
Mm-mm.
addition to that, they took out literacy, not literacy,
Phonics.
but handwriting.
Phonics.
Handwriting,
Phonics,
penmanship.
handwriting, penmanship. They took that out. So you don't teach grammar, so a child doesn't know how to make a complete sentence, and then you don't teach handwriting in case he does learn how to write no make a sentence. He can't write it because you've taken penmanship. So it's all by design. And as I said, it's so insidious, it's cruel, but it's all by design. And going back to what Brother Troy was talking about, the third grade. In my hometown today, that you've been hearing about in the news for the last 2 or 3 weeks, Jackson, Mississippi. The NAACP a few years ago did a study on Jackson, Mississippi, and where all of the young people were coming from who were going into the criminal justice system. Well, they were coming from this very area that I grew up in, a very productive community back then, West Jackson, which is where Jackson State University, the children who were going into the criminal justice system there were coming out of West Jackson. I forget the zip code, but they were going by zip code. So these people, oh my God, these people, they're just unbelievable. But they come up with all these different reasons and schemes to just keep us back. And again, that's why we've got to start fighting back. So if it takes the elders to do it, then we need to go to the elders. We bring in anybody we can help us to start this revolution all over again about reading, because you can see where we are. And our children are in these public school systems around the country, and they are failing them. Mississippi is the poorest state in the country, and everything in that state is below level. Everything, education, uh, healthcare, everything. But that's going on today in Mississippi. It's not too much different than the 1800s, to tell you the truth.
And see, whenever we talk about our history and we talk about the civil rights movement, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, all these different eras that we have been in, we always focus on what happened to us. But I think something that would be helpful is when we talk about these different eras, we go out, we go in and we detail out the knowledge and the work that went into our progression. People like Thurgood Marshall and people, black people who went before these supreme courts, they had to be knowledgeable.
Yeah.
They had to have not only the courage, but they had to have the information and know
Mhm.
what to do, because you saw all of the trickery going on, just like when black people were trying to vote, you
Mhm.
know, and all the games that was played there. And then, so if you don't come to the table and know what you're talking about and have the information, that's those are your tools, the information. And I think that's why we see so much violence out here today. Our children are going from A to Z. They see nothing in between, and they're not thinking about what they could do. There are no boundaries in terms of what they're going to do out here. And that's what we see playing out here on the streets. And I used to tell them at almost every IEP, individual education program meeting that I would be at, if we don't do something the best that we can to help these children, they're going to be out here on these streets, and they're going to be out here in the stores, in the hospitals. They're going to be messing us up,
Mhm.
along with everything else. And
And
so
you,
we have to look at ourselves, and we have to have a responsibility to start imparting this information. And like I said, teaching, talking, singing, writing, whatever, to detail out how we persevered, how we progressed, how we got through these different periods, and what all we actually had to do. Because it was a lot that went on behind the scenes. Just like with anything, you can see a production of anything, but what went on behind the scenes to get you there?
and you know, you're speaking about the IEP. Special education is big, big business,
Mhm.
big business. And when I here again, when I was in this system, 90% of the young people, of the students who were referred for special education were black boys. And I fought tooth and nail every time somebody referred a black student, a black boy in particular, to me for special education. Oh no, 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 no. This child is not eligible for special education just because he's not reading. That's not why you put him in special education. If he's not reading, it's because he hasn't been taught to read. And 99% of the cases, that was the reason. He has not been taught to read. And when you try to get them to do the strategies to help them, here again, you're fighting with personnel about getting people to do that. So
And even the parents,
yeah, yeah,
because
yes,
everybody is getting money.
a check, a check.
Everybody is getting paid here. And the thing about special education, it wasn't originally designed unless you had a severe disability for you to
Mhm.
come in there and stay.
Mhm. Yeah.
you
So,
know you should be coming out of there. They should be dismissing you, after the first 3 years, or the second 3 years. But most of the time, once you got that label, you were in special education for the duration of your time in grammar school. And if you are in special education, you can stay there now until
mhm,
the end of your 22nd birthday.
this
I
big
mean,
money.
if you turn 22 in September or October, you can stay until the end of the year.
And Harvard University has put out study after study after study saying that black boys are put into special education disproportionately to any other race or ethnic group. And that is so true. And that is so true. But and even when COVID came about, you know what I thought about when COVID came about? I said, you know what? In a way, the children are better off. They can learn more at home than they can in some of these schools. People may not want to hear that, but that is a fact. That's a fact. But I will say one thing too, when it comes to our young people, they know how to use this technology. They have these phones, and you can look up anything you want to look up on these phones. I mean, they even have it set up where if you don't know how to pronounce a word, they have it syllabicated in such a way that you learn how to pronounce a word. You can learn the definition of a word. So while we're talking about this, and those who may be tuned into this show, tell your child, tell young people, use this technology in a constructive way, because everything is on these phones, on these iPads, or whatever you have. So that's another way we can take advantage of the technology and increase the percentage, in terms of us, the percentage going up for us to learn how to read. So that, you don't just have to depend on the school system. In
Yeah.
fact, I would tell you not to totally depend on the school system.
And I think one of the things that's important that we're taught in the Bible says that where there's no vision, the people perish. And, so going back to that, even when you look at how curriculum is developed and lesson plans are developed, you usually start out with learning outcomes or objectives. So right up at the front, there's a clear path on where you're trying to go. And then a steps are created and established on how you're going to get there. When you look at the condition that our people are in, they don't see themselves going in the future. So
They
they're
don't.
living right now. So they're doing the best that they can with the tools that they have at their disposal. So as we navigate and we look at what our people are doing, our youth are doing, they're doing the same thing that we're doing. They're trying to navigate life the best way that they
That's right, they
can.
can.
And because they don't have the tools that you may have or I may have, then they're not utilizing. If you see a plumber and a plumber has learned his craft, you're not gonna find him being an electrician. He's gonna use the tools that he has. He's gonna be a plumber. He's gonna do those things. He's gonna utilize the tools that he has at his disposal to try to live as they say now. He's gonna try to live his best life using the tools that he has. If you're a teacher, if you've been trained in education, if you've been trained as a lawyer, if you've been trained as a basketball player, right? You're going to use the tools that you have at your disposal, and you're going to use them to the best of your ability to get to where you're trying to go. And in this society, unfortunately, how we see ourselves and what we see our potential is so low that we're just living day by day, doing whatever we can, doing whatever we see others doing. And I think it's very important that you mentioned earlier in the program the importance of history, but also with history is that we need to begin to plot out where do we see ourselves in the future. That we don't even think about that. Many of our youth don't do the games that I may have done, where we imagined and pretend on what we're going to be and where we wanted to be in life, or what the world was going to be like in the future. So just really being able to inspire that in our youth, which is something that's done through literacy, right? Is that
Right,
just
right.
like traveling does. When you travel and you go to different places, it opens up your mind. And the same thing that can happen with reading. It opens up your mind and it allows you to see different worlds and different realities and things that you may never have had the opportunity to see with your eyes, that you can begin to create and fashion those things and create those pictures in your mind. When you don't do that and the pictures are constantly being fed to you, then you lose that ability to create things in your own mind. And of course, everything that we see in the physical world had to be a thought first. So when you limit our ability to think, then we only can reproduce what we already see in front of us.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, I was thinking about like even the movies that they show today. They leave very little up to your own thought processes about what's going to happen. Or you're often not even surprised about what's going to happen. You might be enthralled or thrilled about what is happening, but you kind of already know, as opposed to films that they used to make in the past. There was a lot of talking in those films. The actor had to talk, and there was a lot more dialogue, and so you had to listen. There was more for you to listen to. Now it's all about the colors and the noise and that whole virtual reality world. It's not real. And so that's why we really support books with this organization, because there's a whole different thought process that goes on when you're actually reading a book. You're
And you
more
know,
likely to underline a word, or check off a chapter, or fold the page, and come back. You're engaging with that book, and sometimes it takes a while to get into a book, just like if you are a jogger and you're going to run every day, it takes you a while to build up, but once you start going, you're on automatic. And I am seeing a resurgence in reading books and people writing books. People are writing books. To the Black Women's Expo, there are a lot of authors there, and people are writing books about their lives. And then there's this urban fiction going on, where that's a interesting writing there. There's some truth, but then there's a lot of stuff that's not true. But I'm seeing more people writing. I'm seeing more book clubs evolve. We certainly have a resurgence in bookstores here in Chicago. I'm seeing that. And so I feel that our people are beginning to gravitate towards this because there is a need, whether it's for information, whether it's for enjoyment. I've talked to some people that are parts of book clubs, and they are like, I can't wait to get into this next book, and we're going to sit down and talk about it. And people talk about it in different settings. They have Zoom meetings. They meet at a club. They meet on the beach. They meet in somebody's house. They meet on the phone and talk about what it is that they're reading. So, we want to, reinforce this and encourage this, because there are also studies that show that your comprehension, your
Mhm.
ability to retain information is greater when you're reading a book as opposed to the audio and what's online, and so just think about that. I'm not going to say to somebody not to listen to a book online or not to read online, but to understand that there is a difference.
Mhm.
You
you
know,
know, Denise, as a teacher, you are in a very privileged position. You have these 30 bodies in front of you, 30 minds. But if you don't have any expectation for those 30 minds, then you're not going to get anything from them. If you don't expect them to read, then they're not going to read. And I was just thinking about this particular class I had. And I knew these children knew the information because I pushed them. I pushed them. And so when they turn in their papers and I'm getting all these zeros, well, I know he knows this stuff. Why is he getting a zero? And I would keep a grade book. I don't think they even keep grade books anymore. But I would keep a grade book for every one of my subjects. And this was a social studies class. And I knew these kids knew that. And so I went back and I'm just looking at all the different grades I had given them in reading, spelling, and so on and so on. And what I found out was that the reason they were getting these low scores is because it was homework and they were not doing the homework. They were not being encouraged to do the homework at home. And so what I did, I started letting them do their homework in class and their grades came up exponentially. So, as a teacher, you have to be creative. You have to care. You have to question why is Johnny doing this when I know he can do that? All of that is about teaching that and about teaching children to do whatever you want them to do. If you don't have any expectations, you're not going to get anything. And that is the case in many of the school systems around this country. They don't have any expectations for our young people. So you get what you expect. If a child knows that you expect him to read a book, he or she's going to read that book because they want to impress you. So that's why I say you're in a privileged position as a teacher because you have these little minds. You have these minds that you can throw so much out to them. And they're ready to learn. They really are, especially in that first, second, third, and fourth grade. They're eager to learn. But if they're not reading by the fourth grade, you're going to lose them because everything becomes dismal and you're going to lose them. So it's important who we have before our children teaching our children. If you don't
And,
have any expectations, you don't need to be there.
and you know, one of the things that you said, and you kind of mentioned this earlier in your educational experience as a student and a younger student. And I know you're just a little bit older than me,
Yeah, I'm on
but
16.
but one of the things that the discussion of the what was lost in so-called integration,
Oh, absolutely.
that we were in a different society, even though with what some may have perceived as inferior textbooks and inferior resources, you were in a community with your teacher.
Yeah.
So the next door neighbor saw and knew that they were making a direct investment
Mm-hmm.
in what their life was going to be. The teachers were in the same community.
Right.
So there was a different commitment level there because they could see right in front of them that these are the individuals that are going to help shape what my reality is.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, going back to just looking once again, and it's important to look at the history, and particularly in this country, but the one of the goals and purposes of education, especially with free education, part of the role of it is socialization.
Mm-hmm.
So there were, even in the founding of this country, there were separate educational paths in which people were taking on.
Mm-hmm.
And one was for those who would be the workers, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's another class of people who would be the rulers.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, if we don't readjust and take in consideration what is our goal and have a clear goal in mind on where we're trying to take our students, then we might find ourselves trying to duplicate the same system, which is failing. And so when we look at education, when we look at reading, when we look at all of these things, it's very important that we make sure that we have a clear picture in mind on where we're trying to go. And then we can galvanize and utilize the resources that we need to make sure that we're creating the best path to get there. So I mean, like, even now is that we have to look at education and how it's changing in the society that we're living in right now. So there's a big push right now. Artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
There's so many jobs that are going to
Yeah.
be lost
Lost.
that
Mm-hmm.
there's not going to be a need for,
Mm-hmm.
right? So as we look at this, is that I think that there's kind of like three. If you can look at social economic status, and you can look at within that, there's three different types of educational systems that exist right there. So for the poor, you basically have individuals who are being prepared to work in the world that
Mm-hmm.
currently exists. For the middle class, you have individuals who are basically in a situation where they're helping to manage the current reality. And then those who are wealthy, they're working and planning on creating what the future is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to begin to reassess where do we want to be, and realize that the educational system that's set up, even for the dominant society right now, is not beneficial for us either. So the
That's
point
right.
that you made, Sister Doris, earlier on, that the benefit of COVID as it relates to the educational system, it shook us and said, well, Dad, maybe I need to rethink this. Even though, of course, as we're talking about literacy, and generally speaking, we usually think about reading, writing, and arithmetic, or mathematics. But just even what are the other skills that we need and that we're going to need so that we can exist and create a new reality for ourselves? So yes, we have to read. Yes, we have to be able to because and understanding the benefit of reading, that it opens your mind and allows you to see things and explore things and begin to redefine what reality is, and helps you to begin to think through what the decisions that you can make, and being able to clearly articulate your thoughts and your ideas. And math allows you to to solve problems and be able to get out of situations and utilize these things in a logical manner. But we have to really establish a picture on what do we want our reality to look like, and begin
Right.
to reassess, is what we're looking at outside of um, basically what white people are doing, is that what we really want to do right now? Is that going
Yeah,
to work for us?
right.
And even like the false hope and the mistake that we made with integration.
Yeah.
You know, we were chasing to get into their schools. We were chasing to have those resources. And when
Mhm.
you look at, even at that time, those who became the leaders in our community, many of them didn't come from integrated schools. They came from the inferior black schools that were taught by
Mm-hmm.
Right.
people who may have had PhDs, because they couldn't get jobs in other places. So we
Mhm.
came with highly qualified teachers because they didn't have an option to maybe
Right.
be in a different place. So we really need to begin to really redefine and look at, as we're moving in the decisions that we're making and what we're pushing for, where are we trying to go? And if that, the clearer that picture becomes, the clearer the easier it becomes to really bring that reality into existence.
And you
You
know
know, and
what
it goes
they're
back to, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there.
Take you there.
If we don't
absolutely.
have a plan, there's definitely a plan already for us.
Yeah.
So
And
we
see,
don't, if we don't have a clear plan and we're not working towards it, there's a plan already made for us,
Absolutely.
and
and
Absolutely.
we'll
see
constantly continue to fall into that plan.
what they're doing now is trying to create a confusion around who we is. When we say we, you know, who is we? I think Biden made a comment when someone was asking about reparations, and his remark was, well, haven't you seen the commercials on television? Haven't you seen the interracial commercials on television? I mean, that was his
That's
response to
his
that.
response. Hmm. Yeah.
Creating this facade about, hey, we're all the same. Black people are integrating and interacting with each other and marrying each other, other people, and just trying to make us, and that whole conversation, they always come up with a term, and now it's diversity. you know there's always a code, like a code word that everybody starts to use it. Even we use it when we're pushing back, but now it's about diversity. you
But
know
it was the northern whites. When I think about my little segregated community that grew up in, we had everything.
mm-hmm,
Grocery store, everything we had in those communities were owned by Black people.
mm-hmm,
And when I look at what is happening to us now, I'm thinking more and more. We need to revisit the civil rights movement and study what we lost versus what have we gained since integration. Because as I look at what's going on, what's happening to us, we're in pretty bad shape, and I can trace it back to segregation. The white
mm-hmm.
northerners wanted everybody to think, oh, segregation was the biggest sin one could ever commit. But it was not for us who lived in those segregated communities, because we had what we wanted. We had what we needed. We had our Black teachers who pushed us. Jim Hill High School, we had calculus, chemistry, we had the advanced math classes, we had advanced English. Now, not everybody in the state of Mississippi did not have this, but we had it. But we need to revisit the civil rights movement, because this integration has been one of the deadliest things that we have experienced since being dragged to America. It's been very deadly for us, and we need to revisit that.
And that's
And,
why I was saying earlier in the commentary about, going even back before then and really studying and looking at how we evolved, you know, to this day, what all happened, the things that we did, what we learned, and the people that helped propel us forward, those people who didn't. We have to look at that. because everybody didn't get involved in that civil rights movement. And then I look at, as you were talking, Brother Troy, I was thinking, about Malcolm, and in our prisons, and how the teachings of Elijah Muhammad came forward and just uplifted so many people. And I'm just gonna say, there are men that I know who came from my community that I thought would never get it together, and they became a part of the nation, and they changed, and they look different, and they act different, and they talk different, and they had a different attitude, you know, and maybe the reading part, that literacy part wasn't there, but the information was there, and enough to uplift them, spiritually.
You know, and
As
I just look at Muhammad University and the marvelous job that they're doing at Muhammad University. You don't have kids coming out of there not knowing how to read. That's a model. So we need to go back and look at these models of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Minister Louis Farrakhan, Marcus Garvey. We need to look at these models again. We have them, but we've thrown them away because we're running after these white people's model, and it's not doing anything but destroying us each and every day that God allows us to wake up and live in this universe.
and then,
It's
like brother Troy was saying, it's, and then we have to recognize this. White people get caught up in this too. It's really about money and power and control. And they pit us against each other. But it's all about those people that you identified that are going to be deciding, you know, what we're going to eat, what we're going to drive, what we're going to wear, what life is going to be, what school and education is going to be about.
And
you know
in white
yes.
corporate America now, they are trying to do away with our culture. An example of what I'm talking about, they're trying to say now that the Puerto Ricans created hip hop. And everybody who knows about hip hop knows that's a lie. But here again, that's the scheme that they have going on to replace us. So we're going to have to go back and revisit this history and regroup so that we can survive and so that our culture will not be co-opted
And
because it's
it's we are such a powerful people and creative
definitely so.
people.
Mhm.
And I don't know that they ever would think that they're going to get rid of us. But it reminds me of what Marlon said, an analogy he made about how everybody gets a shopping cart, and they can come into our community or come through us, and they take whatever they want. And it's happened with our music,
Everything.
just so many things that we have created, and that other people will just continue to take advantage of, and not give us credit for. Even those women that made those calculations,
Mhm.
in their heads, that helped send them to outer space, didn't give them credit for
Not
what they
what.
did. So
Mm-mm.
You know,
we're up at the top of the hour, brother Troy. I'm gonna let you have, some final words here. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and it needs to be some movement behind, all the things that we have talked about, and that's why we are supporting our bookstores here at our RGBC.
I have to evoke the words of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad in saying that separation is the best and only solution. It's the best
Separate.
and only
Yep,
solution.
that's right.
And
Separate.
as we are seeing the things that we've experienced and continue to experience, is that as long as we are amongst these people who have demonstrated that they don't love us and don't care for us,
That's right.
then we're going to continue to be in the situation that we're in. We have proven and shown and demonstrated in plenty of examples. You can see the high movement of many of our people going to Georgia and the surrounding areas of Atlanta and getting land and showing that their ability to do something for themselves. But as long as we're amongst them, we're going to
Yep.
be in a continued situation that we're in. And that's, I have to evoke my dear sister, may Allah be pleased with her, Minister Ava Muhammad, who that was one of her biggest pushes.
Yes.
Is separation. How do we begin to push the program of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which no one can say has not worked? There's no aspect of what we've been given in that plan. You don't have to be a registered member of the Nation of Islam. The whole plan and program that's been pushed out as it relates to eating, as it relates to how we can live our lives, is that if we try it, we've tried everything else and it's demonstrated that it hasn't worked. Why not try ourselves? We have so many examples that demonstrate that we have the capacity, even more so now than we did in the past, that we have the capacity to do something for ourselves. So why not try that? Everything else we tried has not worked.
Well, I think what, when Doris mentioned about COVID, that's what a lot of these young people are doing. They're starting their own business. Some of them are quitting school, quitting college and saying, I can do this myself. And they need our support. They're out here, trying to do that. There are some that are not, but there are a lot of people, young people out here that a lot of people reassess themselves, even not just the young people. A lot of people reassess themselves just for that short amount of time that we were on lockdown, so to speak. Had an opportunity to look at that, to realize that there is another way,
Well, we need to mention our event that's coming up Saturday.
Well, I did mention it at the beginning of the show. So yeah, we can mention it again.
Saturday, September the 17th from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. We're going to have live jazz with a purpose, and all of this is going to be centered around reading, starting a revolution around reading. So if you can come out on Saturday, then it's at 1717 East 87th Street from 2 to 6 p.m. So we expect everyone to come out because we really do want to start this revolution around reading. And we thank you so much for listening. And you can
Let
go.
me say one more thing here. Maggie Brown, when we had the event for Frontline Bookstore, Maggie Brown, Bobby Irvin, very well-known jazz musicians in this city. They came in support of our efforts to help keep Frontline open. And they came at no charge because they believed in what we were doing. They believed in this message. And so Maggie and her band is going to be performing at this event on Saturday. And I know Miguel de la Cern is going to be on the keyboards. I don't have the flyer here in front of me.
David Boykin is going to be there.
David Boykins is another band. And so he has a large band of young people. They play a fusion of hip hop, soul, and jazz music. So they're going to perform first, and then Maggie is going to perform. We will have some speakers. The Underground Bookstore, we're trying to support the Underground Bookstore over there in Avalon Park. It's been over there for over 20 years. And it just amazes me as how people have businesses in their community and they don't know that they are there or they don't frequent them. But that's what's going to be happening. We'll also have some refreshments as well.
Okay, we want you to go to rrgbc.org and donate. We are an independent organization. We don't take money from people we don't believe in. So we're financing this ourselves so we really need your help, whatever you're able to donate. Go to rrgbc.org and donate. And thank you for tuning in tonight.
Okay. Brother Troy, thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All right. You added a lot.
And I'm making my donation right now as we speak. I'm on the website.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Dr. Joy.
Okay. And we also have an online shop. Well, when you go to our website, you'll see all the things that we have going on to help us out. But most of all, we are here to serve and support our community and uplift our community here in Chicago. So, everyone, thank you for coming and have a good night.
That was a good show, Denise.